Welcome to Disciple Well Strategies. My name is Austin Garner. Congratulations, you made it. This is part 5 of our 5-part series. And the biblical financial principle we're going to cover in this video is how a banker lends according to their own abilities. And this principle comes from the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 25, where the Apostle Matthew is recording the parable of the talents, which is very similar to the parable of the minas that we looked at in part 4. The difference is that Matthew records Jesus's focus on the abilities of his servants. And so we're going to look at that, and then we'll look at a detailed example of how Jacob from the book of Genesis in the Old Testament created abundance with only his abilities. And then we'll bring that principle home to look at our typical financial behavior that we see in our lives today and how currently other people are profiting from our behavior and how we can capture that profit for ourselves by simply controlling the lending function on a you and me level. So let's dig into the passage. So the parable of the talents is in Matthew 25, verses 13 through 29. We're not going to read the full parable in detail like we did in part 4, the parable of the talent or minas. Since it's very similar, we don't need to isolate those particular principles again, but we are going to pull out very specific points from this parable, which might reveal a little differences or a little more nuance. But very similar to the parable of the minas, Jesus is speaking to a group of people who had come to faith in him. And as he approached Jerusalem, they thought the kingdom of God was going to appear immediately and that Jesus was going to be the eternal king over the earth. And he used this parable to explain to them that's not happening yet. That's going to come later. I'm going to go away for a while until I return to establish my kingdom forever. I have work for my servants to do. And we should be about our master's business while we're waiting. So Jesus says in verse 13, "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour of the kingdom of God, when it's going to come." Verse 14, "For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away." So God is the source of our resources, our gifts, our blessings, and he gives them to us according to our abilities. And then we should, therefore, deploy them according to our abilities. This passage implies that Jesus intimately knows what you and I are capable of. He knows what he created us for. And so if we desire to discover how God created us, what he created us for, what abilities did he want us to have or did he give us, we should seek an intimate relationship with him so that he can reveal them to us. We should ask him. Jumping down to verse 28, so just to kind of summarize what we're skipping, we know that there were 2 servants that acted faithfully and deployed the resources themselves into the community as they were commanded and had an abundant return on their investment. And then a 3rd servant did nothing. He hid the money and out of fear. So in verse 28 here, the master is confronting that 3rd servant, or he's telling him the consequences. So take the talent from the 3rd servant and give it to the 1st servant. Verse 29, "For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away." So Jesus is implying that good stewards multiply their resources and, in fact, expand their abilities to do more and therefore receive more. But on the other hand, a bad steward eliminates opportunities from even happening. They can't fathom opportunities, and they don't even arise because of their unfaithful stewardship. So Jesus is obviously encouraging us to be good stewards with what he's given us. So now let's look at this concept in a real-life situation through the historical account of Jacob. Genesis chapter 30, if you're not familiar with the history of Jacob, I encourage you to read it. It is fascinating. A lot of details, a lot of drama, a lot of very interesting things happen in the life of Jacob. We're going to be focused particularly on his time at his uncle Laban's, where he is working for a little over 20 years for various reasons. But he comes from a wealthy family of shepherds. Abraham was his grandfather. Isaac is his father. Jacob is the father of 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. And for a very unique reason, he had to flee his home and just travel with very little just in order to get him to his uncle's house for a period of time. He traveled to his uncle's, and there he committed himself to working for his uncle and helping his uncle be profitable, very wealthy. He helped his uncle become very wealthy, Uncle Laban. While there, he got married and had children. He had his sons. At this time in the story, what we're going to focus on is his desire to return home in his confrontation with his Uncle Laban, the interaction with his Uncle Laban. So here we are, verse 25 through 28. As soon as Rachel, his wife, had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, his uncle, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it." So, first of all, it's interesting to me that Laban acknowledged the one true God. He exists. And, in fact, has experienced the blessings of God on Jacob's life that he's a direct beneficiary of. But he wouldn't commit to serving that God, that one true God. He continued worshiping false idols. We see that throughout the history of Jacob, and as we get details of his uncle Laban. So though Laban did not want to serve God, the one true God, he also didn't want to give up God's stuff, the benefits of God. So Laban wanted God's stuff, but he didn't want God. And he basically disregarded Jacob's request. He said, "Name your price. What will it take to keep you here so I can continue getting God's stuff?" In essence, is what he's saying. Jacob said to him, "You yourself know how I have served you and how your livestock have fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly. And the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also?" Laban said, "What shall I give you?" So, again, Jacob left home with nothing. He arrived at his uncle's. He was able to utilize his uncle's, what little value his uncle had, and turn it into an abundance. And here again, Jacob reiterates his request to return home, provide for his own family. And Laban seems to completely disregard his request. It just ignores him. Name your price. Name your price. I'll pay it. I'll give you whatever you want. Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. But if you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flocks and keep it. Let me pass through all your flocks today, removing from it every less desirable animal, all the speckled, spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats. And they shall be my wages. For my honesty will answer for me later. When you come and look into my wages with you, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lamb is found with me shall be counted as stolen." So Jacob didn't want anything from Laban. Jacob built this flock for Laban. And his request is that he wants to, starting with this flock, take the less valuable animals off of his uncle's hands so that his uncle can prioritize the more valuable animals and make them more profitable. So Jacob, I feel like, is being extra generous. He takes the less valuable animals as his own out of his uncle's responsibility, because he wanted it to be clear that the wealth that I accumulate has come from my own hands, my own work, my own abilities, and from God's provision. Nowhere else. He did not want it to come from Laban directly. Laban said, "Good, let it be as you have said." But that day, Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. As soon as the deal was made, the ink hadn't even dried on the contract, if there was a contract. No, there wasn't a contract. Laban immediately went to cheat Jacob out of his wages. He removed the animals that were supposed to go to Jacob. But Jacob didn't complain. He held up his end of the bargain. He continued to pasture his uncle's flocks. What Jacob did do is he took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees, whatever that is, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. The only reason I bring the details of this whole strange technique is to reveal to you that Jacob seemed to really know his business. But hold on, we're not done yet. There's more. Verse 40. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flocks were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus Jacob increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So again, Jacob knew his stuff. But where did he get this knowledge? There's nowhere in this passage that seems to indicate that God gave him some special revelation to use this bizarre technique. Who knows if it's even available today, but regardless, at that time, this was Jacob did it as if he knew exactly what he was doing. So if God didn't give him this knowledge, where did he get it? Remember that he comes from a long line of very successful, expert shepherds. Abraham and Isaac before him, and probably well before that, generations before that. Jacob grew up in this environment, in this business. So he knew how to take a very small herd and make it a large herd. He knew how to manage a herd, a flock. He simply used his own abilities and the skills that he developed over time and became very wealthy himself while starting from nothing. He came to his uncle's with nothing. He built his uncle's herds, and from his uncle's herd, he developed his own wealth. Let's see Laban's response. Chapter 31, verses 1 through 3. Now Laban heard that the sons, Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So, Laban and his sons, they didn't look at Jacob favorably anymore. Specifically says that. But let's think about this for a second. Laban and his sons abdicated their own personal responsibility to Jacob. Jacob managed what little they had and turned it into abundance. Then he produced an abundance for himself from the abundance that he produced for his uncle. He didn't steal anything. This passage seems to indicate taken. He didn't take anything. He just multiplied. But Laban and his sons are complaining that Jacob is becoming wealthy himself. Doesn't this sound familiar to what we're experiencing today? We hire so-called financial experts to manage our wealth for us, then we're shocked that they live better lives than we do. They're getting wealthy on our financial behavior. But the solution for us is the same as it was for Laban. Laban and his sons had over 20 years with Jacob to learn from him, but they chose to be dependent upon Jacob's abilities rather than expand their own abilities. But we can gain more insight into the motivations behind Laban, what was more important to him, by hearing from his own daughters, which were Jacob's wives. Whole nother side note, Jacob, yes, had 2 wives through some deception on the part of his uncle, once again. So Jacob had 2 wives. Read the story yourself, please. It's very good. Jacob summoned his wives, Laban's daughters, Rachel and Leah. And he told them, "This is how your father's treating me, and God has told me to return home." And so this is Rachel and Leah's response. They say, "Is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father now belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do." So according to his own daughters, Laban squandered his wealth and his own children's inheritance. Jacob prospered, though Laban was squandering his wealth. So they're pointing out the transition of wealth to Jacob because Jacob was a good steward and Laban was not. So, Laban is disregarding his own family to chase after his own excessive pleasures. So Laban and his sons chose to live excessive lives. They chose to disregard their own personal responsibilities. And in so doing, they missed out on the incredible opportunity God had for them. And if we want to be good stewards and avoid the consequences of bad stewardship, we too must know what's going on in our own lives and then start taking control of what's happening. We can do it. And it starts by knowing what's going on. So we can start kind of getting an idea of what's going on in our own lives by just simply looking at how money is flowing to us, how money is flowing away from us, and just by looking at some generic expenses that might happen in our lives. So there's really 4 primary categories of expenses: give, live, grow, and owe. Very simple. We give to church, we give to our favorite charities, we give to our friends and family in gifts. Our living expenses: health, housing, transportation, education, recreation, vacation. We're going to pay for these things. We need these things. These are the things of life. Life is expensive. But to pay for these things, we're either going to save for them ourselves or we're going to use someone else's money and pay the price. If we do it ourselves, first of all, we need access to the socially acceptable medium of exchange, money. We need access to enough money that will cover our ordinary living expenses. We need the cash. But beyond our ordinary living expenses, we're going to have emergencies. We're going to have major expenses. This area is the absolute most expensive part of life. Our need for capital is enormous. I mean, just think about this. So, how many medical procedures are we going to experience in our life, the lives of our family? How many houses are we going to purchase? How many cars are we going to purchase? How are we going to provide an education to our children? What are we going to do for recreation and vacation? And all the above. Life is expensive. And these major expenses and emergencies are enormous. If we will prioritize building capital, not only will it provide the cash we need for living and giving, it will also build a solid foundation and streamline the investment process and the education and transition of wealth to following generations. Building proper capital will empower everything that we do. Everything. The problem is that most of our wealth, most of our money, most of our resources are tied up in various different buckets that limit our access and control to them. And so we have no choice but to be dependent on other people's resources. Anytime our needs and our desires exceed our abilities, we got to take on debt. If we need to use government services to meet our needs, we should expect to pay taxes. And the more we demand from them, the more taxes should increase. Same with insurance. If we have risks that are increasing that we can't cover ourselves, we should be able to pay more premiums. We should expect to pay more premiums. Now, I do want to make a side note. We've talked about the benefits of whole life insurance a little bit in this video series. I do not categorize whole life insurance in this bucket. It behaves very differently than all other forms of insurance. And if you study this concept, you'll understand why. As Nelson pointed out, it has more characteristics of a banking system where you can create the best capital strategy possible. So it is separated. It is in this capital strategy, not this insurance service. It doesn't just provide a temporary benefit. It provides an entire life benefit to build capital, systematic capital. So let's think about this for a second, though. All these services that exist, the only reason they exist is because we do not have enough capital for our own lives and therefore need other people's capital. Many times it's striking that we just don't believe that we even have the ability to build enough capital to finance all the needs of our lives, and that we need these services. I mean, that may be true for a period of time, but it's not true universally. Let's think about this for a second. These services have a cost. Who pays that cost? We do. They just have the capital to pay for the things we need, and then we pay them a very handsome income. Now, I'm not saying that these services are bad and we should avoid them at all cost. I'm just simply pointing out that our behavior is making other people wealthier than ourselves, and it doesn't have to be this way. And in fact, I believe that God does not want it to be this way and has told us what to do from the very beginning. He tells us, be the banker. Control the banking process. Build proper capital. Then, not only will you be able to solve most of your financial problems, you will be able to reduce your need for these services. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to take time. But so does anything worth doing. So to summarize this video, wealth is created by work, by labor, by your own abilities. It's not money. Good stewards know their abilities and are discovering their abilities. And in fact, good stewards utilize the resources around them, the value around them, capital, to expand their abilities and therefore attract more opportunities. And then God blesses their faithful action. On the other hand, bad stewards abdicate their own responsibility and miss out on incredible opportunities, then complain about the results. So, ultimately, my success is up to me. Your success is up to you. If you want to be successful in anything, you need to know the truth. And then let that truth guide you to the freedom you desire. Nelson said, he used to say, what was the phrase? He would say, if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. So study the truth of God's word for yourself. Vet the infinite banking concept for yourself. See if it's the right fit for you. So this concludes our series. To bring it all together, the wealth values of a disciple are first and foremost focused on a personal relationship with God. And God created people to be masters over all of his creation, including money and wealth, in service to him. We serve God by investing in people today. And that investment, that impact that we make today, carries on into eternity. We can maximize our impact and our investment in ourselves and the people around us by controlling as much capital, as much of the financial value as we possibly can, with the intent to deploy it like a banker. And we do this throughout our entire lives, or until Christ returns, whichever comes first. Our deployment of those resources, how we invest it, how we lend it out, how we deploy it, should be based on our own abilities, no one else's. And we should realize the amazing abilities that God has given us and intentionally seek to expand those abilities, to invest in more people, including ourselves. I wholeheartedly pray that this video series was helpful to you to see, to reveal how specific, how practical, and trustworthy the Bible really is. And I also pray that you see how just simply controlling the lending function in your own life can radically improve whatever it is you're already doing. And as Nelson said it, he said it this way: it will put jet engines on whatever you are doing. So until next time, I thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. Have a great day. Bye-bye.